Breaking tonight, new details on the madman behind yesterday's execution of two journalists on live TV. An attack that not only shocked the country, but also touched off a new debate over gun control that carried over into the campaign trail today. We have got Stirewalt, Dana Loesch, and Nomiki Konst all here on that. But first, to Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom with the new information on the shooter. Trace?
And Megyn, federal authorities have now confirmed that on July 10th, the shooter legally bought two 9mm Glock handguns, including the one he used to kill Allison Parker, Adam Ward, and later himself. Despite his apparent emotional problems, he passed a background check because there was nothing in his criminal history to stop the purchase. He put a deposit down for the guns 2 days after the shooting at the church in Charleston. That's the attack the killer claimed in his manifesto that pushed him over the edge. We should note he also chose the same weapon as the Virginia Tech shooter, a person he admired. 20-plus pages of internal memos from WDBJ TV detail the killer's erratic and aggressive behavior toward his colleagues. At one point, he was told to seek mandatory counseling for anger and behavioral issues, and he initially complied, but was later fired for poor performance and continued threats. Police had to escort him out of the building. Listen.
On the way out, he handed a wooden cross to the news director, who was at that time Dan Dennison, and he said, "You'll need this." He also made a derogatory comment to Adam Ward, the news photographer whom we lost yesterday, as he left.
The killer claimed his fellow employees discriminated against him for being gay and black, accusations found to have no merit. In his car, police found a gun, more ammunition, a wig, sunglasses, and a black hat. At his apartment complex, police also learned he was apparently aggressive toward his male neighbors, who then filed a lengthy list of complaints with the landlord. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. Well, it has only been about 36 hours since that attack took place, and so far almost every presidential candidate has addressed the shooting in some way. The father of Allison Parker, the young reporter killed, was on this show last night vowing to push for tighter gun laws.
I'm not going to let this issue drop. This is, we've got to do something about crazy people getting guns. I'm going to do something, whatever it takes to get gun legislation to shame people, to shame legislators into doing something about closing loopholes in background checks and making sure crazy people don't get guns. So, this is not the last you've heard of me. This is something that is Allison's legacy that I want to make happen.
Stirewalt is our Fox News digital politics editor. Chris, so almost every single candidate weighed in on this today, and yet is anything likely to happen when it comes to guns, given the power of the NRA in the country and the polls, which show, according to the latest CNN poll, 61% believe tighter gun laws will not reduce violence?
Not only do a majority believe that they won't reduce violence, after the last major push, after the school shooting in Connecticut in December of 2012, guess what happened to public attitudes about gun control? They went sharply against, and we have seen that as more gun control discussion has taken place in Washington, as more politicians have tried to harness sorrow, heartbreak, outrage at tragedy into restrictions on firearms, in fact, people think increasingly it's more necessary to keep the government from taking people's guns than it is to worry about gun control.
Well, so where do you come out on this if you're a Republican? Because, you look at the Republican voters, they are overwhelmingly in support of guns. Now, they do, even Republicans, 88% of Americans favor a federal law requiring background checks, and even Republicans favor this at 81%. But still, no one ever pushes for it on the GOP side, and it doesn't get done.
Well, look, there are, of course, background checks. What is called the gun show loophole is what relates to whether or not you can sell a gun privately. Can you sell a gun privately to somebody else or give a gun as a gift without undergoing a federal background check? That is the only loophole. Now, of course, that doesn't have anything to do with this case. And that only affects a sliver of the guns, right? I mean, we're talking about a sliver of the guns. We're talking about a sliver of guns, obviously not the gun in this case. And again, part of the problem is that in each of these cases, the law that is proposed, you have many Democrats run into the space and say gun control. In this case, even before the shooter had been captured, they were already talking about it, but they proposed things that wouldn't have addressed, and that sort of negates the argument.
Chris, thank you.
You bet.
Also with us, Nomiki Konst, founder and executive director of the Accountability Project, and Dana Loesch, host of Dana on the Blaze TV and author of Hands Off My Gun. Good to see you both. Let me start with you on this, Nomiki. What specifically could have been done in this case so that this guy would not have passed a background check?
Yeah, you know, some of these background checks are not as strict as we think. We use this term background check loosely. Every state has their own specifications for background checks, and the states that have the looser, the lax laws actually have more murders per gun murders than in any other part of the country. I mean, the states, the looser laws have more murders.
Okay, but here's the problem as I see it. You tell me if I'm wrong. You look at the federal standard, and the bar is very high to get something on your record that would disqualify you from passing a background check. Federal law requires you to be adjudicated as a mental defective, so you got to get the court saying you're a mental defective, or committed to a mental institution. That's really all at the federal level. Is that pretty standard among the states?
I think it is. And you know, you have two separate situations here. You have a mental health situation, a crisis in America, and you have a gun crisis in America. And there are lobbies that are preventing both of these from effectuating change. And that's the big problem here, is we don't have standards for mental health. We don't have free access to mental health. Even Obamacare didn't settle this completely.
And we're not going to. I mean, that's just the truth.
You're right.
They haven't changed a thing about mental health. Even in the wake of Sandy Hook, we had the big commission, blah, blah, blah. You tell me, Dana, what could happen? I mean, you're a very pro-Second Amendment person. What could happen? What can we do to make sure the psychos don't get the guns?
We can follow the laws that we have on the books. The case of Virginia Tech, that particular murderer in that case had gotten in trouble. He had to seek mental health. He had to go and undergo these mental health checkups weekly, Megyn, and nobody followed up on it. He was sort of fell through the cracks. For instance, in Charleston, which you and I discussed just last night, you had the murderer in the Charleston case who passed a background check because the government failed to properly document and they failed to properly enter him into the system correctly. And it should be noted that background checks are not foolproof. In fact, there is no conclusive studies at all whatsoever that show that they reduce crime. Now, in terms of federal standards, in Charleston, Roof should not have even been able to purchase a gun because he was charged with a felony, which is all that's needed.
Criminal history,
Megyn,
that's a problem.
Mental health laws
that will help disqualify you.
It is a
problem. But it's the mental, it's the guys like this who haven't quite gotten to the point where they've been committed or really officially identified as a problem, who keep getting guns. And the question is, Nomiki, because what happens is people on the left have argued we need a very high standard for commitment. It used to be lower. Trump was talking about this today, saying in New York City, you got a bunch of crazy people on the streets because they've been let out of institutions because there's no money. And the question is, why is it so hard to get a designation on these people that would disqualify them?
Well, part of it has to do with funding. I mean, we're not funding mental health care. I mean, that's a crisis in America right now. We're not funding mental health care, and we're not fighting for stricter gun law prevention. And I know, Dana, you're very passionate about this, but we have one mass shooting a year. You know, the federal gun registry has prevented 2.1 million criminals from accessing guns. You know, that's something that you are fighting against.
Let her respond. Go ahead, Dana.
False.
No, it's a federal statistic.
First off, I'm not quite sure where you're getting the statistics. I know. Here's the thing. There's no conclusive evidence. In fact, there was a study that was done in 2004 on the background check system and who all it can actually prevent. We just spent almost $1 trillion on Obamacare, and we're going to sit here and seriously argue that we're not spending enough on mental health.
We're not.
It's the laws on the books. No, we're not. So where did the $1 trillion go? And you're going to sit here and get partisan with it? Nomiki, that has nothing to do with it. The fact is we have a criminal problem. And in every single area with the tightest gun restriction, you have the highest homicide rate. That is an indisputable fact.
That's
every
not true.
single state, every state. It absolutely is, and I did write the book on it.
You did not. Wrote a book on it.
Spent
fact
no. Every FBI uniform crime report from 2003 to 2014.
In the South, we have the highest rate of gun violence and the laxest laws. Why is it that our country?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, we do not.
I appreciate the passion, especially on
our suicide rate is lower than most European.
Oh, look at that. The magic of TV. Sorry, you got to laugh, right? I mean, like, that's the gallows humor. In any event, coming up, ESPN benched a baseball star turned analyst after he shared a message comparing radical Muslims to Nazis. And now a top congressman is calling that benching a disgraceful show of political correctness by ESPN. Brian Kilmeade is here with his special brand of humor. Doesn't he look happy? Plus, Donald Trump has been courting evangelicals on the campaign trail, and there's new polling out that suggests it is paying off. Tony Perkins is next on what it means for the 2016 race.
I've led in Iowa, too, with the evangelicals because they get it. They're incredible people that are really smart, and they want to see our country thrive.
Everyone deserves a better tomorrow.